r/atheism. Environmentalbug 4107 says, do Christians ever stop and think, wow, this is silly? I read online debates about religion and the Christians often accuse the atheists of being stupid or believing in nonsense, abiogenesis, a universe created ex nihilo etc. Occasionally an atheist will say you believe in talking snakes or virgin birth or something like that. So my question is, do Christians ever think, wow, this is silly? Why do I believe this? Dragonman 1976 says, if religious people could think critically, they wouldn't be religious. Hiloimthentichrist says, or as Dr. House said in the TV show House, if you could reason with religious people, there would be no religious people. KMKPF says, I was religious. Thinking critically about the claims of Christianity is what made me an atheist. Rakomian says, hey, I did. Atheist now. Velocitable says, good for you, religion is stupid. It's just so shocking, I suppose, that a clearly made up story has caused a very large amount of the user to be religious. It's really awful to see people devoting their lives to this shit that a bunch of people made up ages ago. Technical General 27 says, I'm also a recovering Christian. It's hard when you were born into it. Chillaxinball says, yeah, that's why I stopped believing. The Bible doesn't make any freaking sense when you compare it to what we know about the universe. Rinzel says, they believe in talking snake and a virgin giving birth. Handavo says, no, childhood indoctrination makes them feel guilty for thinking they might be doing something silly and they generally will double down in their minds out of fear of the guilt. Douglas Dyslexic says, I think it's an issue of the Christians that do come to that realization often are no longer Christians after that realization. Forder Glegg says, I watched most of the David Koresh/Wacko doc last night on Netflix. I just don't understand how people can be so brainwashed. They honestly thought he was the second coming. Men let him frick their wives and daughters all in the name of Jesus. I don't get it. Evidently says, only when you mention any other religion. Takes a special cognitive dissonance to go, oh the Quran, that's a bunch of fake made up stuff, but not my book, it's the real word of God. Legend 55 says, I always viewed parts the Bible as fictional stories, an example of how you should live your life. I never took it seriously. When I moved to FL from PAR, I discovered how literally people took the Bible, and I thought to myself, how can people take this stuff so literally? Then I realized what the churches were doing. Brainwashing people with ridiculous stories of punishment, and then salvation through tithing, and realized it's all a money-making scam on an epic level, preying on the uneducated. Then it all fell into place. No wonder they don't believe in education, and want to deafen the depth of education, turn them from science and logic, and keep feeding them magic. The sad part is, it works, big time. r/atheism. Silveri for the 208 says, you guys ever felt like there's no way people believe this and are lying to you? Sometimes when discussing religion people will come up with the most insane logic. Dear friends and family. And I can't help but think they probably believed as children and then grew up and realized their error but were too ashamed and so fake believing. They probably had a childish mentality and were afraid their peers would shame them. And everyone is thinking it. I know this sounds like a conspiracy and I don't truly believe it, but there are times this thought creeps in. For the most part it's most likely not true and there are many that genuinely believe. But I also think that people's reaction probably really is to double down and defend their beliefs, to not look stupid. Like as much as I didn't really like atheist experience with Matt Dillahunty, when he backs people into a corner, first they will lie, but eventually they will say yeah I believe calling death for gays isn't right or something, but they couldn't in the beginning, otherwise that shows their God is bad and THST hurts their ego to admit following a bad God. For context, I have never ever believed. That's why belief in deities and things based on feelings is so hard for me to understand. And maybe it's just my family, but I've heard many ex-theists, be they ex-Muslim or ex-Christian, say the same. They say even other things, their parents lie a lot or have convenient excuses. As a kid there was this magical Buddhist / ancestral pagan thing we do in China that you can ask questions. But conveniently you couldn't ask the same question twice, so you can't verify it. Or my parents would find out perfectly normal things that could be found out through asking my teachers, for example, but they somehow found out through the Buddhist spirit told me. I'm wondering if anyone else felt the Muslim / Christian etc equivalent. Just the constant suspicion of lies. But not being able to verify the hunch is the worst part of it all. Galtpunk67 says, way I see it, religious people are either ignorant or evil. Nav Spaghetti says, trust is a hard thing for people. I live in a society where it's innocent until proven guilty. Even then, it's hard for the people in the society to live by that statement for whatever reason. River Euphrates 1 says, the vast majority of theists I've known live in a constant state of cognitive dissonance, rubber banding between starting to question why their beliefs don't line up with objective reality and then falling back into zealotry. Churches reinforce this by making it a battle for your mind between God and Satan. Saladami says, this illustrates why I think that people can choose what they believe. You hear atheists claim you can't choose what you believe. And that's true within certain broad boundaries. But belief is complex and has many layers. Sometimes it is by choice. Matinee 8 says, yes, I come across those types. I've seen comments that sound like they are trying to convince themselves more than they are trying to convince me. It's only a gut feeling though. I most certainly do think a lot of religious leaders are like this. I doubt very many of them actually believe. It's their followers who are the true believers. Believers, most of them, were raised to believe without question. That means they were never challenged because their community validated them. They didn't have to resort to logic because faith is all they had. When confronted with logic they have to double down on their beliefs because they can't do anything else. At the end of the day, no matter how harmless a belief might be with their intentions, we must remember that they are actually lying. They preach beliefs that they cannot verify and claim them as fact. Do they really believe? Most of them will admit that their beliefs give them comfort, so my guess is probably not. Rockstinico says, and I can't help but think they probably believed as children and then grew up and realized their error but were too ashamed and so fake believing. An often repeated quote is appropriate here: it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Mark Twain. While it would be easy and convenient to label all religious people as being intellectually dishonest, and many of them are intellectually dishonest either intentionally or unintentionally, unfortunately, and as absurd as it seems, there are people who actually 100% believe in their religion. They may not believe for good reasons, and they may not spend any time analyzing why their reasoning is bad, but when you encounter someone who truly believes, we risk building a strawman if we accuse them of faking their belief, and this is problematic for making any progress with them, because we are telling them they've been scammed, when they are not yet convinced they have been. As most atheists eventually encounter, I have been accused by believers that I do actually believe in God, and I'm just lying about my disbelief, and this is extremely aggravating. This is why I find that it's better to just grant that the religious people I interact with do actually believe what they say they believe, even when I suspect they don't actually believe it as strongly as they are claiming. r/atheism. Training Standard 944 says, having faith is such a stupid concept. Like seriously, why do people respect having blind faith in an ancient book from 2000 years ago? What is there to respect? I never understood the concept of just having faith. If an all-powerful all-knowing God exists, then wouldn't having faith be an insult to him? Why would an all-powerful being require faith from the people he created? He made us so intelligent, and then some people decided to believe in an ancient book from 2000 years ago written by lunatic people. Don't get me started on people who use free will as to why God doesn't show himself. In fact, if God showed himself to everyone, it wouldn't take away anyone's free will, but it would give everyone a fair choice to choose. Natty David says, it's willful delusion. Plain and simple. If you have evidence and reason, then you don't need faith. Faith is for people who want to believe, but lack evidence. I want Santa to be real, so he is at his willful delusion. Cleric Warlock says, have faith equals believe what I'm saying, because I really want to be right even though nothing logically supports what I'm saying. Maleficent Clark 766 says, faith is belief in something that deep down you know isn't real. Mark Twain. By Tammy Gain 1 says, faith is negligence at the very least. They didn't even try. You just threw it to the gods. Defective Pomeranian says, faith is for the cowards who can't simply face the shit that life throws at you. I mean, think about it. I tried to have faith, and yet it just made me depressed due to the outcome not being in my favor. I have just had so much shit that I simply can't and refuse to just have faith. I'm not going to just trust something that I can't control the outcome of. Placeholder name 124 says, yes. Faith is belief without sufficient evidence to warrant belief, which can never be justified and especially required. But it's an ancient man-made religion, so things like this are expected. Hypergraphing says, the thing is that when you are a true believer you don't even consider it faith, it's just the way you see the world. And for those of us who were born into it, it's like our mother tongue. Just as I didn't make a choice for English to be my mother tongue, I didn't choose for Christianity to be my worldview. It's like the operating system that came with the computer your parents purchased for you. I don't know how people who came to faith as an adult think of it, but I literally didn't have the words to conceptualize atheism or non-belief. It would be as if someone questioned the validity of gravity. It helped that I went exclusively to Christian schools from K-Uni. Of course not every believer is a true believer, but I certainly used to be one, and when I started asking basic questions I was so shocked. It was almost like I believed the color of the sky was green, and then I learned it was actually blue. UN Theist says, faith is an unreliable path to truth. One can believe things that are true based on faith, and one can believe things that are false based on faith. There is literally nothing that one cannot believe based on faith. Why would any rational person rely on what is a demonstrably unreliable tool to decide what many consider to be the most important thing in their lives? Plexiglass Ranger says, I guess that's the point of Christianity. To follow it, you have to blindly believe in it, to have faith in it, despite all logic, reason and modern science pointing in a different direction. I think a lot of Christians, and usually the fundamentalist/Protestant ones, don't understand that someone losing their faith is not on purpose. For some reason Christians think people purposefully don't have faith, which is illogical, because faith is something you just have or you don't. You can want to have faith all you want and still not have it. I think some people are just more gullible than others. That's all I can wrap my head around. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's just gullible to be a Christian. And 99% of my family is Christian, so it's not like I have anyone atheist to talk to about how I feel. I'm not sure where my brother is at, spiritually or religiously. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.